Hello Pixies, and welcome to or back to my channel. It's Zoe here, and today I have a very exciting video because it is day 2 of my March of the Fairies Reading Challenge videos, and day 2's prompt is fairy book with a historical setting. So today, instead of doing a vlog, we are going to be doing an analysis / comparison of Half a Soul and The Witch Would Not, which are both by Olivia Atwater, and we're going to see what may be the reason why The Witch Would Not isn't as popular as Half a Soul. Let's first start off with who is Olivia Atwater. Olivia Atwater is a Canadian author who started off her writing career in 2020 when she self-published her book Lord Sorcier, which I believe is how it's pronounced. I'm so sorry if it is not, which is the French word for sorcerer, and this was a short novella that she self-published, and that character comes up again in what is going to be her next book, which is Half a Soul, which also came out in the year of 2020 when she self-published it. However, Half a Soul didn't really gain popularity until it was republished when she got a traditional publishing deal with Orbit in 2022. And this is when the book really took off and got popular, and when everyone on Booktube seemed to be talking about the book. So let's go over the premise of Half a Soul. In Half a Soul, we follow Dora. And Dora is kind of peculiar because when she was a child, she has an encounter with a Fae Lord who ends up taking half of her soul. And this leaves her in a predicament because without her half of a soul, she doesn't feel emotions quite the same as other people tend to do, and this gets her into situations where she says the wrong thing or doesn't act the right way or doesn't react the right way. And this causes her a lot of trouble because this is set during the Regency era, because this is a part of the Regency Fairies series, and there are certain expectations of her. And because of this, the family that she has doesn't really like her and thinks she's kind of strange, all except for her cousin, who loves her and who she loves in return. So when her cousin comes of age, her cousin who's just a couple years younger than her and wants to go experience the season in London and asks Dora to go with her, Dora says yes because she wants to do anything to make her cousin happy because her cousin's kind of the only person she cares about, even though Dora believes that she will never find a husband because of the way she is. But when they go to London, Dora meets the Lord Sorcier, which has her diving into the world of magic, a mystery of a sleeping plague, and of course, confronting what happened to her all those years ago as a child. And people loved this book. It came out at the time where cozy fantasy was really hitting its stride within the Booktube community, where a lot of things that were new and fresh and fun and weren't really dark or gritty were automatically being put on with the cozy fantasy label. What people really loved about this book on the time is that it was very whimsical and magical and very, very different from other things on the market, seeing as cozy fantasy was a kind of newer thing at the time, or at least a newer marketing thing. While now everything is still getting marketed as cozy fantasy, this was one of the first to really get that treatment. It takes place in a historical setting and it has these fairy creatures that are very different from fairies that we have gotten used to in fantasy romance books. These fairies are nothing like what we see in works like Sarah J. Maas or whatever. People loved this book so much. It's all like anyone seemed to be talking about. It was on every recommendations list. It was on every TBR. People were eating this book up. But then after they read it, no one really seemed to talk about Olivia Atwater again, which is very strange because on Booktube, when a book gets super popular to the level that Half a Soul got popular, the author automatically becomes popular. And we've seen that time and time again, where one book by this author gets popular and then everyone picks up every single new release after the fact and reads it and makes a video about it because that's what's become popular and that's what people are searching for, because not only have they become a big author on Booktube, they've just become a big author in general. If you're popular, then more people are going to buy your books and they're going to read them. That's generally what happens when a book gets really big. But that didn't happen with Half a Soul. Like, that did not happen with Olivia Atwater. Is that While she did publish another book in the Regency Fairies series after Half a Soul, which was 10,000 Stitches, some people on Booktube did read it, but they didn't really like it because it wasn't quite the same as Half a Soul. It was a very different premise with different characters, and people generally weren't very happy with it if they even gave it a try, because not everyone did. And then after 10,000 Stitches came Long Shadow, which no one really read either, and that's very, very strange. But these are actually her only traditionally published books, because after that she came out with another series called Tales of the Iron Rose, which are actually written by two people. It's written by Olivia Atwater and her husband. So there's two authors attached to that series. And then after the first book in that series, she came out with a new series called the Victorian Fairy Tales, which is like the sequel to the Regency Fairy Tales series, which are also self-published. And the first book of that is The Witch Would Not, which no one has really talked about at all on Booktube. So let's talk about The Witch Would Not. In The Witch Would Not, we follow Winnie, and Winnie has just arrived to Witchwood Manor, and she has come here to be the governess to the Lord's son. But she has also come to find answers that she is desperate to find out and that she has been looking for a very, very long time. But upon her arrival, she learns that things at Witchwood Manor are really much stranger and darker than she could have ever imagined, and that the answers that she seeks may come at a price that she just might not be willing to pay. And this is definitely a sequel to the Half a Soul series, because we do see some of the events of Half a Soul be referenced in this book. Do I think you need to read Half a Soul in order to understand this book? Definitely not. I do not think you need to read it, because it only tells you what you need to know. Because this was not a character that was in Half a Soul. It is not a direct continuation, but it is in the same world and a similar time. Like, it happens a while after, but not terribly long after. Like, it has been hundreds of years or anything. But we do get some slight references to the Regency Fairies series, which is Half a Soul specifically. We don't really get references to the other books, I believe. I could be wrong because I haven't read those yet, but you don't need to read the Regency Fairies in order to read the Victorian Fairy Tales. Obviously, between 2020 and 2022, Half a Soul was revamped and edited slightly, because that's what happens when a publishing company acquires a self-published book, is that they make slight changes. And The Witch Would Not comes out a bit more than a year after that. But since the original writing of the story comes 3 years after that, and you can definitely see the development of her writing style in that time. But I think what makes this one not as popular is the expectation. And let me explain. Half a Soul, as I previously stated, is a historical fantasy romance. But The Witch Would Not is not the same genre. The Witch Would Not is a historical gothic fantasy. And those two words mean very, very different things, because it has very different expectations. Romance has certain plots, certain character archetypes, and certain expectations for the ending. Because romances generally have a happy ending, and it wraps up all nice and pretty at the end. But Gothic fiction is not like this, because Gothic, sometimes called Gothic horror, sometimes considered a subgenre of horror, is much more about atmosphere and confronting things in your mind, and can be slightly psychological. Now, I don't have a great definition for Gothic fiction, Gothic horror, Gothic literature, because no one can really quite seem to agree on exactly the parameters of Gothic fiction, but I'm sure that when I say Gothic fiction, certain things pop into mind. Like One Dark Window is considered Gothic fantasy, Juniper and Thorns considered Gothic fantasy, or you might think more traditional like Rebecca or Edgar Allan Poe. And I believe that these expectations of genre is what has made this series not as popular. As I stated before, people love the whimsy and the romance, and those things are not present in The Witch Would Not. Sure, there are warped versions of these things in The Witch Would Not. You might have some slight romance, and there are those really world-building details that may have been seen as whimsical in the Regency fairies, but we really see their darker edge in the Victorian fairies. So this makes the stories very, very different because they are two different genres, even though they kind of overlap. People, when they love a book that they read by an author, they kind of want them to do the same thing, but kind of differently. So the expectation on Olivia Atwater was to make more historical fantasy romance books. And while 10,000 Stitches slightly falls into that category, it's not as much of a romance as Half a Soul. The same with Long Shadow. It's not really the same. It didn't meet the expectation that was set because of the genre. And then The Witch Would Not has gone even further away because now it has entered a completely different genre, which is Gothic. It has moved from romance to Gothic. So Half a Soul readers might be upset with Atwater that she didn't just do the same thing again, but slightly to the left. Like, she chose to do something different. And by doing so, this has probably made her books in online spaces not as popular because the people who originally read them do not like the direction that she has taken. And she has gone in a very specific direction. But this also means that people that didn't like Half a Soul or people who were not interested in Half a Soul have not picked up her later books because the expectation already is that she is associated with Half a Soul, and they didn't like or don't think they would like that. That's not really what they're into, so they avoid her books anyways. And unfortunate as it is, writers, authors, creators are kind of dependent on online spaces, and because she didn't meet the qualities of the people who read her really popular book, they haven't continued to talk about her books. But because those videos were so popular and so many people got fed them, they haven't realized that she has changed. And of course, I want to briefly mention this because this also might have something to do with it. I have not done enough research to say this is definitely why, but I want to mention this could be a contributing factor, and that is traditionally published versus self-published. The Regency Fairies, Half a Soul, was traditionally published. The Witch Would Not is self-published. That could also be a contributing factor for many, many reasons, but I'm not really going to be diving into that in this video. And let's take a brief look at the stats before I give you kind of my thoughts on both books. And this shows how popular Half a Soul is compared to The Witch Would Not, because Half a Soul on Goodreads has 61,782 ratings, so people who have rated the book in some way. And on Storygraph, it has 20,633 reviews. But The Witch Would Not on Goodreads only has 4,461 ratings. And on Storygraph, it only has 1,557 reviews. That's not right. 1,577 reviews. Those are very, very different numbers. And that really just goes to show that a lot of people read Half a Soul, and not very many have read The Witch Would Not. And I think that's something that needs to change. Because while Half a Soul is everything that everyone at the time that this was popular said about it, it's great, it's whimsical, there's a lovely romance, and a beautiful setting, and a beautiful writing style. It is all those things, and it's a fun book. But The Witch Would Not is truly a special book. Right here, right now, I'm here to say that The Witch Would Not, out of these two books, is in fact the better book. There is more of a plot. You can really see the development in her writing style. There are really intriguing characters, all with their own motivations that are not romance-based. And we also see the history of these characters come into play. There's a lot of backstory, there's a lot of elements, there's a lot of characters, there's a really, really wonderful, great, creepy setting. And while it's vastly different from Half a Soul, and both books are good, that this is the book that needs more recognition as being absolutely fantastic. Also, in The Witch Would Not, we get illusions that this is going to be an overarching story. This is not a standalone book. It doesn't wrap up nice and beautiful at the end, but it doesn't feel like anything is missing either. In Half a Soul, you could argue that we could have gotten more plot. we could have gotten to see more of the relationship blossom between Dora and the Lord Sorcier. But this book, even though you might want more of something, it doesn't feel incomplete because you know the story is going to continue, unlike in Half a Soul where there is no direct sequel with the same main characters. So if you are looking for a happy romantic book, Half a Soul should be your pick. But if you're looking for something maybe a little bit more complex, more interesting, more magical, with a better conceived plot, then The Witch Would Not is actually the better book out of the two. It's literally everything you could want if you like gothic fantasy. Like, this is one of the best examples of gothic fantasy that I have ever read. This is just truly something special, and more people need to talk about it. In conclusion, The Witch Would Not is one of the most underrated books that has released in the past few years, and although Half a Soul deserves the hype that it gets, The Witch Would Not is actually the better story out of the two, and people need to give Olivia Atwater another chance and to read more of her books, even if they have been disappointed by some of her Regency Fairies books. And also, if you have written her off because of how you felt about Half a Soul, then you might want to give her another try in The Witch Would Not. And that's it for the video. I know it's a bit of a shorter analysis type of video, but this is my first time doing something like this. I did the best that I could, and we're just gonna leave it at that. If you like this video and you would like to give it a thumbs up, I would really appreciate that. Also, you can leave down in the comments below if you've read either one of those books, or if there's something you wish I had covered in this video for future reference. That would be really helpful advice. And yeah, I guess that's it. So I guess I'm signing off now. Okay, bye.